walking the line. So we've decided that you are wasting the resources of the chemistry department. And so we are going to give you a semester to clean up your act. And if you do, we'll let you stay. If not, we will kick you out of the department. We may not be able to kick you out of the university, but we'll kick you out of the department. So part of the instructions that I received was that I should go to the BYU counseling department. And there I met a wonderful man named Lynn Rafston. And Lynn listened to my tale of woe, why I was doing what I was doing. I blamed it largely on my father, because my father wanted me to succeed where he had not. And so there was a fair amount of pressure. And after I finished telling my story, he looked at me and he said, well, it looks like you have a choice. You can either spend the rest of your life being pitiful Paul, victim of a strong-willed father, or you can take responsibility for your own actions and be a grown-up. The moment he said that, I knew it was true. It just rang solid inside of me. But it was not happy news for me. And so I called him an SOB, not with the initials. And to my great delight, he leaned back in his chair and smiled because he knew what had happened inside, and he called me an SOB. So between that and the great good fortune of finding and marrying your grandma, I was able to turn my academic life around. You'll look at those scores and you'll see some of them are pretty good and some of them are not so good, but they were good enough to where they let me into graduate school. And because in the sciences they have a combined master's and doctoral degree. I began by doing some literature research. By the time I had finished, I had found 600 journal articles that were related to the things that I was working on for Dr. Butler. That kind of collection of journals, journal articles, is what earns you a master's degree to begin with. But I partially did it for that reason, partially because I wanted to really make sure that I knew what was out there. Dr. Butler had received, did I tell you this, about the grant that he received?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Well, if it sounds familiar, stop me, because old people, Dr. Butler was a really, really bright individual. He graduated from Caltech valedictorian, really bright. To this day, I don't understand why he used me as a lab assistant in courses that he taught, but he did. And then in my senior year, he hired me to do some research along with a couple of other grads on a grant that he had received from Caltech. Jet Propulsion Laboratories was responsible for building the batteries that were used in manned spaceflight, Armstrong, etc. And they had problems with recharging the battery. And so he asked me to work on a portion of the research. JPL gave Caltech a very large grant, and Caltech divided it into thirds and had 1/3 given to study the silver oxide electrode in the battery, and another third went to a different school to study the behavior of the zinc electrode, and the third went to the study of the electrolyte between the two plates. So that's what he had, was a grant to study the behavior of the silver oxide electrode, and that's what I did all my research on. He got the grant towards the end of my senior year, and so for the next 2 years, I was paid by him to do research. That was a plan that kind of backfired for him. Most graduate students didn't do their doctoral research until after they had finished all of their grad school courses. But I did my grad school courses at the same time I was doing research. And so towards the end of my third year, I met with him like we had been doing every semester at the end of the semester, with my telling him what had been accomplished, and said to him, I'm ready to write my dissertation. And he visibly flinched because most of the grad students took 5 years to earn their doctoral degree. And here I was saying, at the end of year 3, I'm ready to write my dissertation. I had done everything that he asked me to do at each of the previous meetings, the end of each semester, but I do not think he could bear the embarrassment of a not particularly bright student getting a PhD so much earlier than the bright students did. It'd be hard for him to explain. So after he flinched, he looked at me and he said, you're going to have to do some more research. And I said, I've done everything you asked me to. He said, I know, but you just need to do some more research. And there was no give on that. So I went back to the pile of papers that I had collected and tried to figure out what additional research I could do. Instead, I discovered a journal paper that described how chemical reactions very similar to the ones that I was studying had been more successfully processed for conclusions using a semi-integral equation. So I went over to the math department and I said, I need to know what this is. And I discovered that out of the 32 members of the university math department, there were only 2 who knew what a semi-integral was. But he patiently explained it to me. So during the summer, I wrote a computer program that was an algorithm for the equation. I pumped into it all of the data that I had gathered before and produced a whole new chapter for the dissertation, plus an appendix describing a semi-integral equation. He gave up. And so he made arrangements for me to do the defense of dissertation. That's where a group of faculty, the 3 members of my graduate committee, he's the chair, and whatever other faculty wanted to join, could sit there and grill me on anything I was supposed to have learned in my classes, undergraduate and graduate, and any question they wanted to ask about the research I had done. That went fairly well. I was relieved, but not particularly surprised, that not one of them asked me what a semi-integral equation was. I figured that since there were only 2 members of the math department that knew what it was, none of the chemistry faculty would know what it was. So it looked like somehow I had done a really bright thing, so they let me graduate.